My parents were so sure my marriage would fail that they skipped my wedding to go on a trip with my sister. But now they're being scammed by my sister's marriage. 7 years ago, my life changed drastically when my parents decided to cut ties with me. All because I stood my ground against their demands and chose to marry my husband Ryan, despite all their protests. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but I knew in my heart that it was the right one for me. But that's just the summary of my story. It doesn't paint the full picture. Let me tell you what I mean. Ryan is from another country. He came here to pursue higher education and we met during college. We tried to just be good friends, but over time, it became clear that our connection went beyond friendship. We fell in love and decided to give a relationship a chance. And as you know, it turned out better than we ever expected. Unfortunately, my parents didn't see it the same way we did. They were firmly against our relationship from the start. My parents had different opinions and believed I could find a better man than him. They thought Ryan's background and our cultural differences would only bring me trouble in the long run. So my parents actively tried to create problems between us, making it clear that they didn't see him as part of the family. They refused to include him in family events or vacations. Even during holidays like Christmas, they wouldn't allow me to bring Ryan. That was even worse for me because my sister's boyfriend, whom my parents approved of, was always invited and treated as part of the family. I always pointed out how unfair their treatment of Ryan was compared to my sister's boyfriend, but my parents would only argue with me. They said my sister's fiancé was someone they had approved of because they had been involved in choosing him, whereas Ryan had not gone through the proper process to be part of the family. The only thing my parents should have cared about was how Ryan treated me, but they were blinded and refused to see him the way I did. That's why as Ryan and I continued our relationship, I started to distance myself from my parents. It wasn't like I had chosen to push them away, but with the way they were acting, I had no other choice. Every time they rejected Ryan, excluded him, or treated me differently because of my relationship with him, it created a barrier between us. It was as if they were forcing me to choose, and I preferred to choose Ryan because my parents had no real reason to treat him the way they did. Things reached their worst point when Ryan proposed to me, and I said yes. When I announced our engagement on social media, I didn't receive congratulations from my parents. Instead, I received my father's fury. Both he and my mother demanded that I break off my engagement with Ryan immediately, saying they were ashamed to have him as part of our family. They told me, bluntly, that if I didn't end things, they would disown me. They had already made up their minds and their ultimatum was clear: Ryan or them. My sister was also disappointed in me for marrying someone outside our community. She told me that news of my engagement had spread and that my parents were now being bombarded with questions from the community. She even asked me to reconsider my decision, saying that I still had time to break up with Ryan. My parents and my sister refused to contribute in any way and made it clear that they didn't want to be part of the wedding. They rejected my wedding invitations and didn't even consider the idea of being there. Ryan was always deeply hurt by how my family treated him, though he rarely showed it. Over the years, he had come to accept that my parents and sister simply didn't want him, despite never giving him a real chance. He made multiple attempts to reach out and talk to them, hoping they would see him for who he truly was, but they had no intention of changing. Ryan's parents were everything my family wasn't. From the moment they met me, they welcomed me with open arms. They were happy about our relationship, our engagement, and our wedding. There was no struggle with them. They simply saw us as a couple in love who wanted to get married. They didn't like what my family was doing, but that didn't make them resent me. If there was any family that should have had concerns about this wedding, it should have been Ryan's. Since my own family was doing everything they could to make me look bad, but they understood that I was not my family, so they have always been the best towards me. On my wedding day, I still had a small hope that my family would change their minds. But instead, I received a message from my mother that crushed whatever hope I had left. She wrote, "Hope, we're not coming to the wedding. We still can't believe you're going through with this. If you do, just know that your marriage will fail. He is not the one for you, but you refuse to see it. We're done trying to convince you. So if you get married today, we want nothing to do with you ever again." To make things worse, I found out that the three of them had decided to go on vacation on the day of my wedding, just to stay away from everything, almost as if they were disgusted by what I was doing. They posted pictures and updates of their trip all over social media. It was their way of letting the rest of the family and the world know that they didn't support me or my marriage. Clearly, they wanted to humiliate me because I didn't do what they asked. After the wedding and the distancing from my family, I made the decision to block all three of them, my parents and my sister. They had made it clear that they didn't want to be part of my life, and I couldn't keep holding on to the hope that they would change. It was a painful but necessary step for my peace of mind. Since then, they haven't tried to reach out to me either. They've continued living their lives as if I never existed. Still, we have mutual connections, both family members and friends, who would occasionally pass along bits of news about them, just as I assumed they would receive updates about my life. For example, someone mentioned that my sister got married shortly after me. She married the same man my parents approved of. The one who had their seal of approval. Even so, all these years, I have never regretted my decision to marry Ryan. He is an incredible and loyal partner. He knows what I've been through and has stood by my side through it all. Yesterday, my paternal grandmother reached out to me. I haven't mentioned her in my story because it would take too long to list who took my side and who sided with my parents. All you need to know is that she took my parents' side from the beginning, and I haven't had a relationship with her either. During our brief conversation, she asked me to unblock my parents because they were trying to reach me and couldn't get through. I wasn't open to the idea after everything that had happened, but I asked my grandmother what it was about. She only said it had something to do with my sister and that it was urgent. And she didn't say it casually. She really seemed worried about what was happening to my parents, as if it were something very serious. I won't bore you with all the thoughts I had about whether to call them or not. I simply unblocked them and called my father. After an awkward moment, he explained what was going on and why he and my mother were trying to contact me. Here's what has happened to my parents all this time. It turns out that my sister's supposedly perfect husband, the same one my parents had approved and given their seal of approval, turned out to be a complete fraud. Apparently, this man had been telling everyone that he was a stock market operator. Over the years, he convinced my parents and my sister to give him large sums of money, assuring them that he would invest it in the market because he was very knowledgeable. According to my dad, he bragged about his supposed ability to create wealth and even promised my dad that he could retire early thanks to his financial expertise. My family blindly trusted him, believing that he could never betray them. Hence, the stamp of approval. This man had sold them a dream life if they accepted him into the family and gave him a lot of money. My parents were blind. It all turned out to be a lie. Recently this man disappeared, completely vanished, taking all the money with him. He didn't even leave a note for my sister or give her any explanation. To make things worse, my sister had just given birth to a child. This man not only took everyone's money but also abandoned his own child. I knew my sister was pregnant, but I didn't know if she had given birth or not. I hadn't received any updates about them for a long time. Toward the end of the conversation, my dad told me that this was the hardest time of their lives, which is why they needed the whole family with them. He apologized for what had happened between us in the past and admitted that both he and my mom deeply regretted letting me go. It was all very strange because I never imagined having this kind of conversation with them. When they cut me off, I basically thought that was it for us. I didn't know what to say. I felt like it was all oddly convenient. After years of silence where they didn't bother to ask about me, wish me a happy birthday or anything, they were reaching out now when they were in crisis, when they needed money and support. They only needed me because they had been scammed, not because they truly wanted to make amends. I more or less explained this to my dad on the call. I told him that while I felt sorry for them, though honestly I didn't understand why they felt the need to update me on their life choices after voluntarily excluding me from their lives all these years. If they didn't want me in their lives because I didn't do what they thought was best, now that they had done what they thought was best and it turned out terribly, that was not my problem. We all know the real reason they contacted me. I know it. And my dad knows it too because he told me that he had no reason to reach out other than simply reconnecting. He said my sister was going through a very hard time and needed everyone's support to get through it. But it didn't take much pressing, no interrogation techniques needed for him to finally admit that he had been quietly following my life through some of our relatives over the years. That's how he knew that Ryan and I were doing well in life. What came next was even more unexpected. My dad admitted, "You were right from the beginning. You married that man despite our disapproval, and he turned out to be a good man, someone trustworthy. Your sister, on the other hand, married someone we approved of, and he scammed us out of all our money. Now we have nothing left." Yes, this was the same father who once believed that everything he said was the absolute truth. Then, my dad continued admitting that he and my mom were desperate, overwhelmed by everything that had happened with my sister's husband. He told me that I needed to step up and help my sister since she had no one else with her. He begged me to call my sister, talk to her, and assure her that I would support her financially. He said that would mean a lot. I don't doubt that giving my sister money after she got scammed would mean a lot to her. Too much to be exact, because she did nothing to deserve it, and receiving money from me would be a huge event, one that was not going to happen. We don't even have that kind of money to help her. We're doing fine like any other regular people, but we save, pay our debts, and try to build a life here. It's not like we have extra money to give, especially not to a group of people who, until a few hours ago, weren't even my family, but now suddenly wanted to be again. My dad said I didn't have to give him an answer right away, even though I already told him no, that he and my mom had recognized their mistakes, and that now they would love to have a conversation with me and my husband to get to know him better. My parents don't care about getting to know him. They just want to see how they can manipulate us to get some money. I don't care if I'm the bad guy right now. They're not getting anything from me, and especially not from Ryan. I told him everything we talked about, and he's on the same page as me. He believes in a strict zero money for my parents and sister policy. So I just wanted to share my story because I know how much people enjoy a good story about narcissistic parents and the golden child. If anything happens with my story, I also plan to provide updates whenever possible. Update 1. Today, I had the pleasure of receiving a call from my sister. If my introduction sounds sarcastic, it's because it is. But I'm not that heartless, so I congratulated her on the baby, which she thanked me for and seemed really happy to hear from me. Maybe she thought the congratulations would come with a gift. Spoiler alert, nope. It was the first time we talked in years, and it felt extremely strange. As we spoke, she opened up and told me a few more details about what had happened with her husband. He had disappeared overnight, taking all of their money, absolutely everything, even what she had in her purse. Now she was in a difficult situation because she had expenses for her child. She mentioned that she was considering hiring a lawyer, but the problem was that she had no money to cover the legal fees. She also needed to hire a private investigator to track down her husband. She told me how much she needed just to get started, and it was a lot. I asked if she had asked our parents for help, though I already knew the answer. And she said that they had also lost their money in her husband's schemes and couldn't lend her anything. I just wanted to check if the story lined up, if they weren't contradicting each other. But then she said the magic words. She expected me to help her. She begged me to send her money every month for her and her baby because she had no one else to turn to. She said it would only be for a while, just until she could get back on her feet. I asked if she had in-laws or anyone from her husband's family who could help her, but she said no because he was supposedly an orphan. You can't say I didn't try to help her. I also asked my sister why she hadn't gone to the police, given that her husband had practically stolen their money and disappeared. She could easily file a case against him. However, my sister argued that she didn't want her child's father to be arrested or end up in prison. She insisted that he was a good man, and all she really wanted was for him to return the money he took from our parents and take responsibility for child support. Nothing more. Well, our definitions of a good man differ significantly. We don't agree on many things. I tried to press her a little more, asking if she had any idea why he might have disappeared, whether he could be having an affair, or if there was another reason, but she admitted that she had no answers. I read some of the comments on my previous post and I agree that this whole situation seems very, very suspicious. What if her husband hasn't really disappeared? What if this is some kind of elaborate scam to make me feel guilty and get money out of me? For now their stories match. But given how my family has treated me in the past, I can't completely rule it out. Besides, they could have rehearsed everything. Even if everything she said turns out to be true, I don't want to help her. Is that wrong? I think that if the situation were reversed and Ryan was the one who scammed people, my parents wouldn't waste a second of their lives on me. They would probably tell me they were right and even mock me. I think I've been kind enough to them by just listening, even if it was only to find out more about what was happening because, well, I'm a little nosy. Update 2. How many of you said my parents and my sister were lying? Well, you were right. At least to some extent. This is going to be long to explain properly, so bear with me. My parents have been pressuring me to change my mind and actually help them with my sister's situation. My response was always something like, look, I don't believe that you're not involving the police or lawyers if you were really scammed. I suggested they tell me the real story behind all of this. And maybe I would consider helping them. Don't start commenting just yet. I wasn't actually going to help them. I just wanted to keep pushing to find out what was really going on. I won't deny it. I was just as invested in this story as all of you, so I wanted to get to the bottom of it. I could have ended everything here, blocked my parents and stopped making updates, but I'm committed. At first they kept repeating the same thing over and over again, which was suspicious because it sounded rehearsed, and I wasn't wrong because it was, but not completely. Finally, when they told me what really happened, though it could still be another lie, the story was very different from what they had said before. According to them, this is what supposedly happened. My sister was married to a man who, according to my father, was a good man. So my parents' seal of approval still remains intact. My brother-in-law wasn't doing too badly in his business. He bought rundown houses or apartments, restored them, and then sold them for a profit. A good catch, hardworking, smart, and with money. At least, more than my parents had. They saw that, especially my father, and wanted to replicate it. He asked my brother-in-law for advice, but my brother-in-law told him it wasn't a good idea to get into this business unless he really knew what he was doing. My brother-in-law had been working in the field for years, first as a contractor and then by buying and selling properties. However, my father didn't listen and used a large chunk of his money, plus a loan, to buy a small multi-story building. The plan was simple: fix it up and rent it out as office space. My father thought my brother-in-law would help him and that the whole process would be easy, then the money would start rolling in. But my brother-in-law had warned him, and he was right. The property needed more repairs than expected, and my brother-in-law couldn't do them because he was busy with his own projects. Plus, my father expected my brother-in-law to work for free, at least in terms of his time. My brother-in-law tried to help a few months ago, which is when all of this happened, but only by visiting the property and giving some advice. However, as I mentioned, it had been a bad investment from the start. My father had planned to use the rest of his savings to restore the property and live comfortably, but he was going to need much more money. Even if he managed to repair the property, it was still likely to be a bad investment. The place wasn't ideal for offices for several reasons, which I won't detail because this post is already massive. For a while, they pressured my brother-in-law to help them, either by giving them a loan, contributing his work, or something to make the property profitable. My brother-in-law refused, and then another issue exploded within the family. My sister had been unfaithful. Again, there are more details that would make this update too long. But my brother-in-law discovered that the child wasn't his and left my sister overnight. So, as you can see, part of my parents' story was true, but the reason why they weren't going to the police or a lawyer was a lie. My sister had no legal claim, and my brother-in-law hadn't disappeared. He also hadn't scammed them. My parents had scammed themselves with their ideas of easy money without effort. And where do I come into all of this? For starters, my parents wanted me to help my sister with her child. The real father isn't financially stable. He works in a supermarket earning minimum wage. According to my parents and what my sister has said, it's not enough to support her and the baby. He doesn't even have a steady job, only temporary ones, because he constantly travels and does these types of gigs to get by. But my parents also wanted me to help pay for the repairs on their investment. That is far beyond our means. We have a house we're paying off, expenses like cars and other responsibilities. I don't know why they thought I could afford to invest that kind of money. Wait, invest is the wrong word. They wanted me to give them money so they could have something for retirement. Clearly, someone has been telling them things about me that aren't entirely true. But if they're relatives of my parents, I suppose it runs in the family, maybe? When I explained my position in detail, I think I heard their hearts shattering on the other end of the line. It was one thing to ask for a few $100s for my sister, which I also wasn't going to give. But thousands? That was completely out of the question and out of any reasonable reality. Unless they can open a portal to another dimension where they're swimming in money, I think their chances range from 0 to negative. One good thing came out of this. I don't regret being the bearer of bad news for my parents. Update 3. People have been asking for more details, so I hope this is the final chapter in the story of my parents and my sister. One thing I forgot to mention is that my brother-in-law had already divorced my sister before my previous update. He didn't have to give her any money because the reason for the divorce was her infidelity. Otherwise, she probably would have gotten quite a bit. She also gets child support, but it's the amount that a hippie who lives on the road can afford. Did no one tell her that if she was going to cheat, she should have at least done it with someone who could support her? I know cheating is wrong, but I wonder if the baby's actual father meets my parents' seal of approval. Sorry for not asking them. My parents finally sold the property at a loss. Although from what little I know about real estate, that was probably the price they should have paid from the start if they wanted to invest realistically and not lose money. Now that I'm no longer useful to them, my parents have probably remembered how much they hate me and my husband. But that's fine because it's time to block them and move on with my life. It's hard to do because they were giving me the best gossip I could imagine, but it's time to let them go. So with this, I say goodbye to all of you. Edit. I texted my father to ask if they approve of their grandson's real father, and after several hours of leaving me on read, they still haven't responded. Now I have finally blocked them.